8:15 in the morning. The Bab-el-Mandeb Strait. The guided missile destroyer USS Mason was already at battle stations. This was not a drill. Captain Miller stood in the center of the bridge and stared at the digital displays. His primary radar showed a slow-moving flock of migratory birds. His secondary fire control system showed a high-speed anti-ship cruise missile. How could a single contact be two different things at the exact same time? The morning air over the Red Sea was heavy and thick with salt. It shimmered against the gray steel of the destroyer. Below the deck, the ship hummed with the power of 4 gas turbine engines. The crew moved with a quiet and practiced urgency. They were 60 nautical miles from the coast of Yemen. In these narrow waters, a technical glitch was not just a frustration. It was a potential catalyst for a regional war. The captain looked at his tactical action officer. "Give me a clean track," Miller said. The officer shook his head. "Sir, the Aegis combat system is struggling. The signature is shifting every 4 seconds. It is a bird. Then it is a missile. Then it is a bird again." Captain Miller gripped the edge of his command chair. His jaw tightened. He had exactly 30 seconds before the contact entered the inner engagement zone. If he fired and destroyed a flock of birds, he would be the man who wasted a $2 million missile on a group of pelicans. If he waited and the contact was a missile, his ship would be a burning wreck before the next minute passed. Inside the Combat Information Center, the atmosphere was frozen. The room was dark, lit only by the blue and green glow of the consoles. Dozens of analysts watched the same flickering icon. They called it a ghost. A phantom in the machine. But the threat felt real. The electronic support measures had detected a brief pulse of targeting radar from the shore. It was the electronic fingerprint of an Iranian-made silkworm launcher. The tactical action officer spoke again. His voice was flat and professional. Target is at 15 nautical miles. Altitude is 50 feet. Speed is 400 knots. 400 knots is too fast for a bird, the captain noted. "Correct, sir," the officer replied. "But the radar cross-section is too small for a missile. It is the size of a sparrow." The contradiction was absolute. The laws of physics were being challenged by a piece of silicon. The captain knew that modern electronic warfare could do strange things to a radar return. A digital jammer could make a plane look like a mountain. It could make a fleet look like a single boat. But this was different. This was a biological signature layered over a kinetic threat. Miller looked out the reinforced windows of the bridge. The horizon was a hazy line of blue and white. There was nothing to see with the naked eye yet. The contact was still too far away. He checked his watch. 20 seconds remaining. "Prepare to slave the close-in weapon system." "To the track," Miller commanded. "Systems are slaved and ready," the weapons officer reported. "Search radar is locked. We are in auto-engage mode. On your command." The ship began to heel slightly to the left as the helmsman maintained a steady course. The vibration of the engines increased. Everyone on the bridge felt it. The Mason was a billion-dollar instrument of war, and right now, it was confused. The most advanced sensors in the world were providing two different versions of reality. The captain felt a bead of sweat roll down his neck. He ignored it. He thought about the ships that had come before him, the sailors who had died because they waited too long. He also thought about the innocent civilians in the region. A mistaken launch could be interpreted as an act of aggression by the batteries on the coast. It was a delicate balance, held together by a few seconds of human decision-making. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 8:21 in the morning. The Combat Information Center of the USS Mason. Lieutenant Chen sat before the primary warfare console. This room was known as the Blue Room. It was a windowless world of flickering screens and low light intensity. The air was kept at a constant 62 degrees to protect the sensitive electronics. The only sound was the low hum of cooling fans and the quiet murmurs of the watchstanders. Lieutenant Chen was the tactical action officer. He was responsible for the immediate defense of the ship. His eyes were fixed on a single green symbol. The track was now 18 nautical miles away. It was closing the distance at 500 miles per hour. The signature is still unstable, Chen reported. His voice was steady. 1 second, it is a high-speed projectile. The next, it is a cluster of small biologicals. The Aegis system cannot find a solution. Captain Miller stepped into the blue room from the bridge. The transition from the bright morning sun to the dark interior was jarring. He stood behind Chen and watched the glass. "Is it jamming?" Miller asked. "If it is sophisticated," Chen replied. "We are not seeing a noise floor increase. We are seeing a physical contradiction. The radar energy is bouncing back in two different ways. 40 miles to the east, a hardened concrete bunker on the Yemeni coastline." Major Reza of the Iranian Coast Defense Force adjusted his headset. He was a veteran of 12 years in the Missile Corps. He was not looking for a fight. His mission was to provide coastal surveillance and protect territorial waters. But his equipment was acting as strange as the Americans. His Russian-made radar display showed the USS Mason clearly. It also showed a cloud of interference surrounding the ship. To Reza, it looked like the Americans were testing a new form of electronic cloak.
Active radar lock on the incoming target.
"Sir,"
Estimated time to impact.
his technician said, "the American destroyer has turned its fire control radar toward our position. They are locking onto us." Major Reza leaned forward. He could see the power level spiking on his sensors. "Do not activate the missiles. Stay in passive mode. We will not be the ones to start this." "But they are preparing to fire," the technician insisted. "If they launch, we have 6 seconds to respond." Reza felt the weight of the decision. He knew the Americans were jumpy. He also knew that his own superiors would not tolerate a loss of face. He reached for the secure radio. Back on the USS Mason, the communications officer broke the silence. "Captain, I have a broadcast on the international hailing frequency." The voice that came over the speakers was distorted but clear. It spoke in English. "American warship. This is the Coast Defense Command. You are illuminating a sovereign facility with aggressive radar. Cease your activity immediately. We are not engaging you." Captain Miller looked at the track on Chen's screen. The mystery contact was now at 12 nautical miles. It had just accelerated to Mach 1.2. "Tell them we have an inbound threat," Miller ordered. "Tell them if they are not controlling it, we are going to splash it." The communications officer began the transmission. "Unknown station. This is United States ship Mason. We are tracking an inbound weapon on a bearing from your location. We are defending ourselves." There was a long pause. The only sound was the static of the open channel. Then the technician in the blue room gasped, "Captain, the track just split. We have 3 separate contacts now. All of them are on an intercept course. Time to impact is 45 seconds. The bridge of the Mason began to vibrate as the ship's engines surged to full power. The defensive systems were now in their final stage of readiness. "Identify the tracks," Miller commanded. "I cannot," Chen shouted over the rising noise. "They are changing shape on every sweep. They are missiles. They are birds. Now they are nothing. They are gone." The screens went blank for 2 seconds. When they returned, the 3 contacts were only 5 miles away. 8:26 in the morning, 10 miles north of the Hanish Islands. The 3 ghost contacts on the radar screen had vanished as quickly as they appeared. But a new threat had taken their place on the physical horizon. Captain Miller stepped out onto the bridge wing. The wind whipped at his uniform. He raised his binoculars and scanned the shimmering blue water. A single Iranian fast attack craft was cutting through the swells. It was a high-speed patrol boat painted in a disruptive blue and gray camouflage. It was moving at 40 knots. It was heading directly for the USS Mason. The bridge of the destroyer was a hive of controlled activity. The lookout called out the bearing, 045, range 4,000 yards. The tactical action officer spoke from the Combat Information Center, over the internal line. "Captain, the radar is still giving us conflicting data. One sensor shows the boat. Another sensor shows a swarm of drones surrounding the boat. I cannot tell what is real," And what is a digital projection? Miller looked at his executive officer. The rules of engagement were a complex set of layers. They were designed to prevent accidental war, but they were also designed to protect the lives of 300 American sailors. We cannot fire unless there is a clear hostile act, Miller said. Or if we can prove hostile intent, a boat approaching us at 40 knots is provocative. But in these waters, it is not an attack. The executive officer wiped his forehead. Sir, if those are drones and they launch, we will not have time to react. The close-in weapon system is ready, but it is a short-range solution. We need to push them back now. If we wait for a hostile act, we might already be hit 6 miles away. On the deck of the Iranian patrol boat, the commander stood behind a heavy machine gun. He was not looking at the American ship. He was looking at the sky. He had seen the same anomalies on his own navigation screen. He believed the Americans were using a new type of electronic weapon to hide their true position. He was closing the distance to get a better visual of what his sensors could not explain. The Iranian commander spoke into his radio. We are coming alongside the American destroyer. They are jamming our signals. We will use visual signals only. Do not uncover the missiles unless I give the order. On the USS Mason, the tension was reaching a breaking point. The technical glitch was no longer a curiosity. It was a shroud. It was hiding the true nature of the environment. Every sailor on the ship knew that a single nervous finger on a trigger could change everything. They were operating in a gray zone, where the technology was failing and the human factor was all that remained. Miller walked back into the bridge. He looked at the display. The fast attack craft was now at 3,000 yards. It was close enough to see the spray of water from its bow. The boat is illuminated by our fire control radar, the weapons officer reported. We have a solid lock on the hull, but the air search radar is still screaming. It says there are 20 targets in the air. All of them are converging on our position. Captain, the tactical action officer interjected. I have a new reading. The electronic support measures are picking up a signature. It is a drone controller. It is not coming from the boat. It is coming from the shore. Miller felt the weight of the moment. If the boat was a distraction and the real threat was in the air, he was looking the wrong way. But if the boat was the primary threat, he could not afford to look away. Bring us to flank speed, Miller commanded. Turn 30 degrees to starboard. We are going to put some distance between us and that boat. Launch a Nulka decoy. If there is a missile in the air, let it find the decoy instead of us. The ship groaned as the gas turbines kicked in. The wake behind the Mason turned into a massive wall of white water. The destroyer began to pull away. The Nulka decoy launched. With a sharp hiss, it hovered in the air like a small rocket. It broadcast a massive radar signature. It was designed to look more like a ship than the ship itself. The Iranian boat did not turn away. It accelerated. The radar technician in the Combat Information Center screamed, "Captain, the contacts are back. They are not ghosts. They are behind us. They are behind us. They are inside the wake." Range: 1,000 yards. 8:29 in the morning. The Southern Red Sea. The Iranian patrol boat was no longer just shadowing the USS Mason. It had locked its fire control radar onto the American destroyer. This was an overt act of aggression. Inside the Combat Information Center, the electronic warfare console emitted a high-pitched, steady pulse. It was the sound of a ship being targeted. Captain Miller stood behind the tactical action officer. The blue light of the consoles made every face in the room look pale. "Confirm the lock," Miller said. The officer did not look up from his screen. "Confirmed. We are being painted by a fire control radar from the fast attack craft. They have a solution. If they have missiles on that rail, they can launch in seconds." "What about the contacts in our wake?" Miller asked. "They just accelerated," the officer replied. His voice was tight. "They are moving at Mach 1.5. They are staying at 0 feet altitude. They are literally carving through the water behind us. Range is now 700 meters. Miller looked at his executive officer. The weight of the rules of engagement sat heavy between them. Under the current standing orders, the captain had the authority to defend his ship against an imminent threat. A radar lock from a known military vessel was the definition of an imminent threat. But they were in one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. 3 commercial tankers were visible on the horizon. A missed shot or a stray missile could result in a catastrophe for global trade. "We cannot fire yet," the executive officer whispered. "If we hit that patrol boat and they have not fired a physical weapon, we are the aggressors. We start a war on the morning news. If we wait for them to fire, we might not have a ship to defend," Miller countered. 8:30 in the morning. The bridge of the Iranian patrol boat. The Iranian commander was shouting into his radio. He was terrified. On his screen, the American Nolka decoy looked like a massive incoming missile. He believed the Americans had fired first. He had ordered his radar team to lock on to the USS Mason as a defensive measure. "They have launched a weapon," the Iranian commander told his headquarters. "We are in the terminal phase of an engagement, requesting permission to return fire." The response from the shore was delayed by static. "Confirm the target." "Are you sure it is a weapon and not a decoy?" "It is too big to be a decoy," the commander shouted. "It is hovering. It is waiting. We are locking our missiles now." 8:31 in the morning. Back on the USS Mason, the tactical action officer looked up with wide eyes. "Captain!" The mystery contacts in the wake just did something impossible. They did not hit us. They went under us. They are directly beneath the hull. The entire ship suddenly shuddered. It was not an explosion. It was a massive surge of water. A giant swell rose up from beneath the destroyer, lifting the 80,000-ton vessel several feet into the air. The sound was like 1,000 freight trains passing under the steel plates of the deck. On the bridge, the lookouts were knocked to the floor. The ship heeled violently to the right. "Report," Miller yelled, grabbing a handrail to stay upright. "Sensors are washing out," the officer shouted. "The radar is blind. The sonar is deaf. Whatever is under us just released a massive burst of acoustic energy. We are losing power to the main displays." The bridge went dark for 3 seconds. The emergency red lights flickered on. Outside, the water was churning in a violent, unnatural circle. The Iranian patrol boat was also caught in the turbulence. It was being tossed like a toy. The mystery contact was no longer a bird or a missile. It was something else entirely. And it was right beneath their feet. 8:32 in the morning. The southern Red Sea. The USS Mason leveled as the massive swell subsided. The emergency red lighting in the Combat Information Center pulsed like a heartbeat. On the bridge, Captain Miller wiped a smear of grease from his cheek. The smell of ozone and scorched electrical insulation filled the air. Power is restored to the main tactical bus, the tactical action officer reported. His voice was higher than before. "The Aegis system is rebooting. We are blind on primary radar for 60 seconds. Miller looked out at the water. The Iranian patrol boat was 3,000 yards away. It had been slammed by the same wall of water. It was dead in the water and listing 10 degrees to its port side, but its weapons were still uncovered. The canvas shrouds had been stripped away by the force of the wave. 2 C-802 anti-ship missiles were now visible on their launch rails. They were pointed directly at the Mason. "The Iranian boat is preparing to launch," the lookout shouted. "I see a flash of igniter exhaust." Inside the dark hull of the destroyer, the weapons technicians worked with frantic precision. "System is back," the officer screamed. "We have a track. The mystery contact is sitting 500 meters off our bow. It is on the surface. It is not a bird. It is not a missile. It is a solid metallic mass." Captain Miller did not hesitate. The time for caution had passed under the hull of his ship. Authorized battery release for the close-in weapon system. Set to manual override. Slew the 5-inch gun to the patrol boat. If they twitch, we fire. The mount for the 20mm Gatling gun began to whine as it rotated. It was a computer-controlled system, capable of firing 4,000 rounds per minute. It was the last line of defense. The Sea Whiz searched the air with its own independent radar. It was looking for anything that moved. On the deck of the Iranian patrol boat, Captain Bagheri struggled to stand. His radio was screaming with orders from the shore. Major Reza was shouting for a status report. "The Americans used a mine," Bagheri yelled into his headset. They tried to sink us from below. I am arming the missiles. We will not go down without a strike." "Wait," Major Reza commanded from the bunker. "Look at the water between you. What is that object?" Bagheri looked over the railing. 500 meters away, a black, seamless shape rose 2 feet above the white foam. It had no windows. It had no visible engines. It did not reflect the morning sun. It seemed to absorb the light around it. It was the source of the radar anomalies. It was the thing that had moved through the water at Mach 1.5. "It is not American," Bagheri whispered. "It is nothing I have ever seen." The Iranian commander looked back at the USS Mason. He saw the massive 5-inch gun barrel of the destroyer drop. It was aimed directly at his bridge. He saw the rotating barrels of the close-in weapon system tracking the air above him. Back on the Mason, the tactical action officer held his hand over the firing key. "Captain, the Iranian missiles are active. Their seekers are searching for our hull. We are at 15 seconds to a launch sequence. Hold your fire," Miller said. His voice was a low growl. "Look at the contact. What is it doing?" The black object on the water began to vibrate. The sound was not a roar. It was a low-frequency hum that vibrated the teeth of every sailor on both ships. The water around the object began to boil, not from heat, but from pure kinetic energy. "Captain," the officer said, "the contact is expanding. It is growing on the radar. Get a lock on it," Miller ordered. "Everything we have, both the boat and the object. If one fires, we kill both." 8:34 in the morning. The 2 warships sat frozen in a triangle of death with the unknown object. The electronic warfare systems of both nations were screaming. The sensors were overwhelmed. The humans were the only things left with the power to stop the clock. "Targeting solution is locked," the weapons officer reported. "Awaiting your command." The morning was no longer quiet. The hum of the object grew into a scream. 8:35 and 10 seconds in the morning. The bridge of the USS Mason. Captain Miller watched the countdown on the secondary weapons display. The close-in weapon system was tracking at maximum speed. Its rotating barrels were a blur of steel as they slewed toward the horizon. 5 seconds to automated engagement. The tactical action officer screamed over the noise of the cooling fans. "Captain, the Iranian boat has launched a drone. It is a small suicide variant. It is coming in fast on the starboard quarter." Miller did not blink. "Fire. Kill the drone. Do not hit the boat." The Gatling gun roared. A 2-second burst. A wall of fire. The sound was like a giant piece of canvas being ripped in half. The drone disintegrated into 1,000 pieces of burning plastic 200 meters from the hull. 8:35 and 40 seconds in the morning. The deck of the Iranian patrol boat. Commander Bagheri saw the American gunfire. From his perspective, he did not see the drone. He only saw the white-hot tracers of the American Gatling gun. To him, it looked like the USS Mason was strafing his bridge. The adrenaline of the moment overrode the commands from the shore. He believed his ship was being destroyed. "Fire. Launch everything. Now." The first C-802 missile ignited with a deafening roar. The solid rocket booster kicked the weapon off the rail. It leveled out at 10 feet above the water. It was heading directly for the USS Mason. The white smoke of the launch obscured the sun. 8:36 in the morning. The Combat Information Center of the USS Mason. The alarms were no longer chirping. They were a continuous scream. "Vampire. Vampire. Missile in the air. Bearing 045. Range 2 miles. Time to impact. 6 seconds. The tactical action officer did not wait for an order. He smashed the cover off the firing key, launching Sea Sparrow. The destroyer shook as a vertical launch tube exploded with fire. An evolved Sea Sparrow missile climbed into the sky on a pillar of white smoke. It arched over and dived toward the incoming Iranian weapon. Between the 2 ships, the unknown black object reached its terminal state. The blue light coming from its center was now so bright that the electronic sensors on both ships began to melt. The cameras on the USS Mason bridge turned to static. The radar screens in the Iranian bunker went white. The air itself seemed to crack. The sound was not a bang, It was a vacuum, a sudden, violent collapse of pressure. The American interceptor missile reached its target. The Iranian missile was 500 meters from the Mason. The black object was exactly in the middle. The world went silent. Every electronic device within 10 miles ceased to function. The missiles did not explode. They did not fall into the sea. They simply stopped. They hung in the air for a fraction of a second, defying every law of gravity and motion. The blue light expanded into a sphere of pure energy. It swallowed the American missile. It swallowed the Iranian missile. It swallowed the black object. 8:36 and 30 seconds in the morning. The space between the USS Mason and the Iranian patrol boat. The blue sphere did not explode. It did not expand into a wall of fire. It simply vanished. Along with it, the American Sea Sparrow and the Iranian cruise missile disappeared from existence. There was no smoke. There was no debris. There was not even a ripple on the surface of the water where the weapons should have collided. Captain Miller stood on the bridge of the Mason and gripped the cold steel of the window frame. He felt a strange tingling sensation in his fingertips. Every screen on the bridge was a sea of gray static. The constant hum of the ship had died. For the first time in his career, Miller heard the actual sound of the Red Sea. It was the sound of waves lapping against a dead hull. "Status report," Miller said. His voice sounded loud in the unnatural silence. "Everything is down, sir," the helmsman replied. He was frantically pushing buttons that did nothing. Navigation, communications, steering. "We are dead in the water." Miller looked out toward the Iranian vessel. It was 3,000 yards away. It was also motionless. He could see the Iranian sailors standing on the deck. They were not at their guns. They were not reloading their missile rails. They were huddled together at the railing. They were looking at the same patch of empty ocean. They were looking at the same patch of empty ocean. Then, the water began to move. It did not boil this time. It parted. A massive, perfect circle of dry seabed appeared in the middle of the Red Sea. The water was held back by an invisible force. It was a cylinder of empty space reaching down to the floor of the ocean. In the center of that circle, resting on the sand and ancient coral, were the two missiles. The American Sea Sparrow sat perfectly upright on its fins, 5 feet away. The Iranian C-802 was positioned in the exact same way. They looked like museum exhibits. They were pristine. They were not scorched. They were not broken. They were pristine. They were not scorched. They were not broken. They had been plucked out of the air at supersonic speeds and placed gently on the bottom of the sea. "Miller," the executive officer whispered. He was looking through a pair of traditional handheld binoculars. "Look at the sand around the missiles." Miller took the binoculars. He focused on the seabed. In the sand around the two weapons, a pattern had been drawn. It was a series of geometric lines and circles. It looked like a mathematical proof. It was too precise to be natural. It was too complex to be human. "They were stopped," Miller said. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Whoever did this did not just save our ship, they saved theirs too. Behind them, in the Combat Information Center, a single monitor flickered to life. It was not showing a radar map. It was not showing a weapons status. It was showing a single line of text. The letters were in English. Then they shifted into Farsi. Then back again. The message read, "The zone is restricted. Cease hostilities." The bridge crew stared at the screen. The hair on the back of Miller's neck stood up. This was not a tactical glitch. This was not electronic warfare. This was a direct intervention. The water wall began to collapse. Slowly, the cylinder filled back in with a gentle rush of blue water. The missiles vanished beneath the waves once more. They were gone for good this time. The power to the USS Mason suddenly surged back. The lights brightened. The cooling fans began their low-frequency roar. The radar screens began to sweep. "Captain," the tactical action officer shouted from the interior. "I have the Iranian boat back on track. They are turning. They are heading away from us at high speed." Miller looked through the binoculars again. He saw Commander Bagheri on the bridge of the patrol boat. The Iranian officer was looking back at the Mason. Bagheri raised a hand. It was not a salute. It was a gesture of recognition. Then, the Iranian boat disappeared into the morning haze. The black object was nowhere to be found. The sky was empty. The birds were gone. Miller sat in his command chair. He felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of exhaustion. "Secure from general quarters," he said. "Gather every scrap of sensor data from the last 10 minutes. We need to tell Washington what happened, even if they never believe us." The morning was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. 8:38 in the morning. The Red Sea. The Combat Information Center was a room of ghosts. The message on the primary tactical display remained. "The zone is restricted. Cease hostilities." It did not flicker. It did not fade. It sat there like a physical weight. Lieutenant Chen stared at the words. He ran a diagnostic on the graphics processor. The system reported that it was functioning normally. There was no virus. There was no external hack detected in the firewall. The message was being generated from within the core logic of the Aegis combat system itself. "Captain," Chen said. His voice was a whisper. "The message is embedded in the system. It is not a radio transmission. It is as if the computer has decided to talk to us." Captain Miller walked to the console. He looked at the text. He felt a cold shiver. As a military officer, he was trained to deal with kinetic threats. He knew how to fight missiles. He knew how to outmaneuver ships, but he did not know how to fight a message from an unknown intelligence that had just rewritten his weapon system's code in a microsecond. "Check the fire control loops," Miller ordered. "Can we still slave the 5-inch gun?" Chen tapped several keys. "Negative, sir. The system is locked. We have power. We have propulsion. But every offensive weapon is in a hard lock state. It says, unauthorized use of force detected. Engagement prohibited." 40 miles away, the Iranian coastal bunker. Major Reza was standing in front of his own tactical screen. The technician next to him was trembling. The Iranian system was showing the exact same message, but it was in Farsi. The words were burned into the phosphor of the screens. "Major," the technician said, "the missile batteries are unresponsive. The silos are locked. The digital keys have been changed." Reza looked at the radar plot. The USS Mason was sitting still. His own patrol boat was fleeing the area. The entire sector was quiet. For 10 years, this stretch of water had been a powder keg. Now, it was a library. "Call the patrol boat," Reza commanded. "Tell Commander Bagheri to return to port immediately. Do not engage. Do not look back. We are done here today." Reza picked up a secure phone to Tehran. He knew that what he had to report would sound like madness, but the empty missile rails on his radar did not lie. Back on the USS Mason. 8:42 in the morning. The ship was slowly regaining its standard operating rhythm, but the tension had shifted from fear to profound confusion. The crew moved like sleepwalkers. They had seen the laws of physics suspended. They had seen a power that made the most advanced destroyer in the world look like a wooden sailing ship. The executive officer approached Miller on the bridge. "Sir, we have regained satellite communication with Fleet Command. They are asking why we dropped off the grid for 5 minutes. They are also seeing the Iranian retreat. They want to know if we fired." Miller looked out at the horizon. The sun was higher now. The water was a brilliant, unflinching blue. "Tell them we did not fire. Tell them the Iranians did not hit us. Tell them we experienced a massive atmospheric anomaly and a total system failure." "Are we going to tell them about the message?" the officer asked. Miller paused. He thought about the pattern in the sand. He thought about the missiles sitting on the ocean floor. "Not yet. If we tell them the truth, they will think we have suffered a collective breakdown. We need to download the sensor logs first. We need proof." "Captain," the tactical action officer called out from the interior. "The message. It is changing." Miller stepped back into the dark room. The text on the screen was shifting. "The zone is restricted" was gone. In its place was a set of coordinates. They were for a point in the middle of the Indian Ocean, a place where the water was 4 miles deep. Below the coordinates, a new line appeared. "We are watching the choice." "What choice?" Chen asked. "The choice to fire," Miller said, "or the choice to listen." Suddenly, the screen blinked. The standard tactical map returned. The Aegis system hummed back to its normal state. The weapon locks vanished. The ship was fully armed and dangerous once again, but no one on the bridge felt powerful. 8:45 in the morning. The USS Mason began to turn. "Set course for the coordinates," Miller said, "and notify the Iranians on the open channel. They should see this too." 8:46 in the morning. The Southern Red Sea. The USS Mason settled into a steady 15-knot cruise. The vibration of the hull was rhythmic and familiar, but the atmosphere inside the ship remained fractured. Captain Miller stood at the center of the bridge. He watched the digital compass on the overhead display. The destroyer was now heading south toward the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait. Behind them, the Iranian fast attack craft was a receding speck on the horizon. It was heading north, toward the port of Al-Hudaydah. "The Iranians are maintaining their course," the lookout reported. "They are not increasing speed. They are not activating their search radar. They are just going home." Miller nodded. "Keep the 5-inch gun in the stowed position. I want no aggressive posture. If they stay quiet, we stay quiet." Inside the Combat Information Center, Lieutenant Chen was running a deep system scrub. He was looking for any trace of the message. "The zone is restricted." It was gone. The coordinates for the Indian Ocean were also gone from the main display. But Chen had photographed the screen with his personal phone. He looked at the image now. The numbers were precise. They pointed to a spot in the Somali Basin. It was one of the deepest and most remote parts of the ocean. "Captain," Chen called over the internal line, "I have completed the initial diagnostic. There is no evidence of a cyber attack. The system logs show a massive power surge at 8:36. But there is no record of the text appearing on the screen. It is as if the hardware saw it, but the software did not." Miller stepped into the dark room. He looked at the empty consoles. "And the weapons?" "Fully operational, sir," Chen replied. "The hard lock has been released. We can fire whenever you want." "I do not want to fire," Miller said. "I want to know what just stopped a war." 9:15 in the morning. The Gulf of Aden. The USS Mason passed through the narrowest point of the strait. On a normal day, this was a high-tension transit. The crew would be at a higher state of readiness. They would be scanning the rocky shore for missile batteries. Today, the shore was silent. The Iranian batteries had gone into passive mode. The local militias had ceased their radio chatter. It was as if a giant hand had been placed over the entire region, pressing down on the noise. Miller watched a commercial container ship pass them in the opposite direction. It was a massive vessel carrying thousands of colorful boxes. Its crew was likely unaware that the world had almost changed 45 minutes ago. To them, the morning was just another Tuesday on the water. 11:30 in the morning. The bridge of the USS Mason. The executive officer approached the captain with a printed message. "Sir, we just received a flash priority update from 5th Fleet. They are reporting similar anomalies from other units in the region. A French frigate in the Persian Gulf reported a total system freeze at the exact same time as us. A Chinese destroyer in the Arabian Sea reported the same thing." Miller read the report. It was a pattern. The intervention had not been localized to the Mason. It had been a theater-wide event. Whoever was watching the choice was watching everyone. "Did they get the message?" Miller asked. "The French did," the officer replied. "The Chinese are not saying. But they have pulled their ships back to their base in Djibouti. Everyone is disengaging. It is a total stand-down across the entire Middle East." 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The open water of the Indian Ocean. The USS Mason was now 500 miles from the site of the encounter. The Red Sea was behind them. The sun was beginning its long descent toward the western horizon. The water was deep indigo. The ship was alone in a vast, empty circle of ocean. Captain Miller walked out onto the bridge wing. He looked down at the water. He thought about the 2 missiles sitting on the seabed 4 miles below. They were symbols of a conflict that had been rendered meaningless in a single second. The most advanced weapons of 2 rival nations had been treated like toys, placed aside by a parent who was tired of the noise. "Sir," the helmsman called out, "we are approaching the first waypoint for the coordinates." Miller looked at the horizon. He did not expect to see a black object. He did not expect another blue sphere, but he felt a strange sense of anticipation. The crisis had resolved, not through diplomacy. not through combat, but through the revelation of a superior force.
Intercept course.
Maintain course, Miller said. We are going to find out what is waiting at those coordinates, even if we are the only ones who show up. The ship moved forward into the deep blue. The afternoon was warm. The threat was gone. But the mystery was only beginning to expand. 3 days later, 11:15 in the morning, the Pentagon, Washington, D.C. The windowless briefing room was filled with the highest-ranking electronic warfare experts in the United States military. They sat in high-backed chairs and stared at a massive projection of the sensor logs from the USS Mason. The room was silent. Only the hum of the air conditioning broke the tension. The lead analyst stood up and pointed to a graph of the electromagnetic spectrum recorded during the encounter. The lines were not curves, they were sharp, vertical breaks. "Sir," the analyst said to the admiral at the head of the table, "the kinetic energy of the incoming missiles did not dissipate. It was not absorbed by an explosion. It was deleted from the environment. Our systems did not fail. The laws of physics in that specific 1,000-meter radius were temporarily rewritten." The admiral leaned forward. "And the message?" "The zone is restricted." "Was it a hack?" "No, sir," the analyst replied. "We have dissected every line of code in the Aegis core. There is no external entry point, no virus, no malware. The message originated from the hardware itself. It is as if the atoms of the processor were rearranged to display those words. It was a direct communication from an intelligence that understands our technology better than we do." 1,000 miles away, in a quiet coastal garden in Iran, Major Reza sat on a stone bench and looked out at the Gulf of Oman. He had been placed on administrative leave. His superiors did not know what to do with a man who claimed a black ghost had swallowed $1 million missile. Reza did not mind. He felt a strange, unfamiliar sense of peace. He remembered the look on Commander Bagheri's face when the water parted to show the missiles on the seabed. Reza knew that the world was still dangerous. Nations would still argue. Men would still seek power, but something had changed in the southern Red Sea. A boundary had been established. For the first time in history, the ultimate weapons of humanity had been treated like children's toys. The ego of modern warfare had been crushed by a single, silent intervention. Back on the USS Mason, 4:30 in the afternoon, the ship was now deep in the Indian Ocean. It was moving toward the coordinates provided by the unknown entity. The sea was a flat, polished mirror of blue. Captain Miller stood on the bridge wing and watched the horizon. He was no longer looking for threats. He was looking for answers. The executive officer joined him. "The crew is calling it the Ghost of the Mandeb," the officer said quietly. "Some of the younger sailors think it was aliens. The older ones think it was a warning." "It was both," Miller said. "It was a demonstration of a higher order. We spend our lives perfecting the art of the strike. We build faster missiles, smarter radars, better ways to kill from a distance. And then something comes along and shows us that our best efforts are nothing." "Are we still going to the coordinates?" the officer asked. "We are," Miller replied. "The fleet wants us to investigate, but I do not think we will find a base or a ship. I think we will find exactly what we found 3 days ago." Silence. The USS Mason reached the final waypoint at 6 o'clock in the evening. The water was 4 miles deep. The sonar was clear. The radar was empty. There was no black object, no blue light, just the vast, unending ocean. Miller looked at the display. The message had not returned, but the memory of it was burned into the mind of every man on his ship. "The zone is restricted. We are watching the choice." The captain realized then that the coordinates were not a destination. They were a test to see if the humans would follow a command they did not understand. He had followed it. The Iranians had followed it. For a few brief hours. Two bitter rivals had acted in perfect, silent coordination. The Red Sea was open again. Commercial ships were moving through the strait without fear. The missile batteries on the coast were cold. The regional tension had evaporated, not because of a treaty, but because no one wanted to be the first to find out. What happened if they ignored the restriction? "Turn us around," Miller commanded. "Set course for home. The mission is complete." The USS Mason began its long turn. The white wake carved a perfect circle in the blue water. Modern warfare is often described as a game of chess. But on that Tuesday morning, both sides had realized they were not the players. They were only the pieces, and the player had decided that the game was over. No missiles flew, no ships were lost. But history had shifted. When the line was crossed, both sides chose restraint. Modern warfare is decided not by who fires first, but by who chooses not to fire at all. 3 weeks later, 11:15 in the morning, the Pentagon, Washington, D.C. The briefing room was a high-security vault deep beneath the surface. It was known as the tank. Here, the Joint Chiefs of Staff sat around a polished mahogany table. They were not looking at maps of enemy positions. They were looking at a single piece of hardware. It was a circuit board pulled from the primary radar of the USS Mason. The Chief of Naval Operations spoke first. His voice was low and gravelly. The technicians tell me the silicon has been altered, not by a laser, not by a physical tool. The atomic structure of the chip itself was rearranged while the ship was at sea. It still functions perfectly, but it carries a signature we cannot replicate. A civilian analyst from the National Security Agency stood at a podium. "Sir, it is not just the Mason. We have confirmed that 24 different vessels from 6 different nations experienced the same event. Even a Russian Tu-95 bomber over the Norwegian Sea reported a temporary engine flameout and the same message in Cyrillic. The zone is restricted." The room was silent. The political fallout was massive. For decades, the United States had projected power through its carrier strike groups. Now, that power was conditional. Every maritime commander in the world was suddenly aware that their most expensive weapons could be deactivated by a force they could not see or track. 10:15 in the morning. Tehran. The Supreme National Security Council. Major Reza stood before a committee of silent men in dark robes. He was no longer on leave. He had been promoted, not for his tactical skill, but because he was one of the few men who had looked into the abyss and maintained his composure. "The Americans are as confused as we are," Reza told the council. "Our intelligence confirms they are stripping their ships apart looking for a hack. They are afraid, but it is a different kind of fear. It is the fear of a hunter who has realized there is a larger predator in the woods." The chairman of the council leaned forward. "And the Red Sea? Can we resume our operations?" "Negative," Reza said firmly. The message was clear. The zone is restricted. If we fire another missile, we do not know if the intervention will be as gentle next time. They stopped the missiles in midair. They could just as easily have turned them back toward the launch site. The report from Tehran and the report from Washington reached the same conclusion. The era of unchecked regional skirmishes was over. The Mediterranean, the Red Sea, the South China Sea, all of them were now under a silent, global surveillance. Military analysis teams across the globe began to categorize the event as the first contact incident. But it was not a contact in the traditional sense. There were no diplomatic envoys. There were no radio greetings. There was only a set of rules enforced by a superior technology. Strategic planners began to rewrite their doctrines. The focus shifted from offensive capabilities to defensive resilience. The world was entering a period of enforced peace. It was a peace built on the common understanding that a higher power was now refereeing the game of human conflict. Inside the intelligence facility, experts analyzed the coordinates in the Indian Ocean one last time. They found nothing on the surface, but deep-sea sensors picked up a rhythmic pulse. It was a sound that matched the human heartbeat. The military analysis was simple. The weapons were not the problem. The choice to use them was.